Rain arrived the way it often did here, without urgency, without noise, simply as a soft, steady presence that changed the whole color of the afternoon. By the time the first drops began tapping the kitchen window, the countryside had already turned quieter. The road beyond the gate, usually pale and dusty, darkened into a smooth ribbon. The rice fields across the way shimmered as if a thin sheet of glass had been laid over them. Somewhere far off, a rooster called once, then fell silent, as if he had decided it was a day for listening. Inside the house, the kitchen held its own kind of weather warmth that came from simmering water and wood that had lived a long time, and the faint smell of tea leaves tucked away in tins. A kettle sat on the stove, round-bellied and familiar, with the handle polished by hands. You rinsed it out carefully, turning it under the tap and watching the water spiral away. The tap squeaked softly, an odd sound, like the house clearing its throat. On the counter, a small basket waited with a few lemons, slightly dimpled and bright against the dark wood. A jar of honey cut the window light and turned it into amber. A plate held butter wrapped in paper, edges pressed by fingers, and beside it lay a wooden spoon with a burnished bowl that carried years of storing. A quiet afternoon had its own checklist, not written anywhere, just held in the body. You reached for the tea tin, first the green one with tiny painted flowers. When you lifted the lid, a gentle scent rose out, dry leaves, something grassy, something sweet and warm like sun on straw. You took a pinch between your fingers and felt the leaves crumble, papery and light. Behind you, a soft shuffle. "Is it raining already?" a voice asked, still half sleepy. You turned and saw your younger sister in the doorway, hair loosely tied, wearing an oversized sweater that looked like it had belonged to someone else first. "It started," you sighed. "Not heavy, just steady." She stepped closer, peering out at the blurred garden through the glass. Raindrops slid down in slow trails. "It smells like rain," she sighed, as if it were a new discovery every time. "It always does," you replied, smiling. The kettle filled. You set it on the burner and turned the flame low. The click of the knob was small but satisfying. Soon there was the faintest whisper of heat, a gentle hum that promised something comforting on the way. While the water warmed, you opened the cupboard and pulled down two mugs mismatched, the kind that made mornings feel personal. One had a faded illustration of a cat carrying a basket. The other was plain, with a tiny crack near the handle that you always avoided touching too hard. Your sister reached for the bread box. "We still have some," she sighed, lifting the lid. Inside were two rolls wrapped in cloth, slightly stiff from morning ire. "Let's make something warm," you sighed. "Butter, toast and lemon honey." She nodded like it was the obvious answer, like this was what rainy afternoons were made for. The cutting board came out thick, scarred with knife marks, carrying the faint smell of garlic and onions no matter how many times it was washed. You laid a lemon on it and pressed your palm down gently. The skin was cool and slightly oily. When you sliced into it, the knife made a crisp, clean sound. The inside was pale and glossy, little pockets of juice shining. Your sister set the rolls on a tray and turned the oven dial. The oven's old fan made a soft, uneven whir, like it was waking up reluctantly. Outside, rain deepened into a more confident rhythm. The roof answered in gentle drumming. Water slipped from the eaves in thin streams and disappeared into the garden. You stirred the honey in its jar, slow and careful. It moved like thick sunlight, gathering on the spoon before falling in a golden ribbon. You added a little lemon juice to a small dish and watched it swirl, making the honey lighter, brighter. The kettle began to sing, not loud, but a rising murmur that filled the kitchen like a friendly reminder. Your mother appeared then, not in a hurry, carrying a basket of washed greens. "It thought it smelled lemon," she sighed, setting the basket down. Her hands were damp, and she dried them on her apron with the kind of practiced motion that said she'd done it 1,000 times. "We're making tea," your sister announced. "And warm bread." Mother's eyes softened. "Good." She looked out the window. "Rain means the soil will be happy." She began sorting the greens, mint, and a handful of fragrant leaves you'd picked earlier in the week. She spread them gently on a cloth, letting them breathe. The mint smelled sharp and sweet, and when she rubbed a leaf between her fingers, it released a clean, cool scent that mixed with the lemon and honey. "Let's add mint to the tea," she sighed, passing you a small sprig. You dropped it into the teapot. The leaves floated, then sank, then rose again as if deciding where they belonged. Tea in this house was never just tea, it was a small ceremony, water and time and attention. You poured the hot water over the leaves. A fog of steam rose, softening the air. The tea deepened from clear tea gold, then tea a warm, honeyed color, as if the rain outside had been poured into a cup and turned kind. Your sister leaned in close, watching. It's waking up, she whispered. You put the lid on and let it steep. Waiting was part of it. Waiting was often the best part. While you waited, Mother walked over to the sink and began washing a small pile of dishes that had collected just a few bowls from lunch, a plate with crumbs. She did it slowly, letting the warm water run over her hands, the soap making little clean bubbles that slid away. Your sister picked up a cloth and began wiping the counter in small circles, humming quietly. The cloth squeaked against the wood, a sound so ordinary it felt soothing. You took a moment to tidy the spice shelf, not because it needed it badly, but because rainy afternoons invited small care. You lined jars up, labels facing outward, wiped a bit of dust from the lid of the cinnamon. When you lifted it, the scent rose immediately, warm, sweet, slightly sharp like memory. The oven dinged softly. Your sister opened it, and a warm breath of air rolled out. The rolls had softened, their tops slightly crisped. She tapped one gently, smiling at the sound. You sliced them open, spread butter that melted instantly into glossy pools, and then drizzled the lemon-honey mixture over the top. The smell was bright and comforting, like sunlight filtered through rain clouds. Mother set down 3 small plates. The ceramic was cool against your fingertips. You poured tea into the mugs. The stream made a quiet, steady sound, and the steam rose in little spirals. For a second, it looked like tiny ghosts, friendly ones, slipping upward and disappearing. You carried everything to the small table by the window. The table was old. Its surface had scratches and a faint ring from a mug someone once left so too long. It wore its age gently, like the house did. Outside, the garden had turned glossy. Leaves shone, and the small stone path was darker now, each stone outlined by water. A bird hopped along the fence and shook itself, sending droplets flying like scattered beads. Your sister wrapped both hands around her mug and sighed. It feels like the whole world is softer when it rains, she sighed. Mother took a bite of warm bread and closed her eyes for a moment, chewing slowly. It slows people down, she sighed. If in the trees, you listened, rain. The faint click of the cooling oven, a distant whine moving through the bamboo, the gentle clink of spoon against mug. There was no more need to fill the quiet too much. It held everyone just fine. After tea, Mother rose and went to the small shelf where she kept her knitting basket. She returned with yarn the color of cream and a pair of needles that clicked softly as she began. Your sister pulled a notebook from her backpack and a pen that was chewed slightly at the end. She started writing, not fast, but steady, pausing often to stare out the window as if the rain had hidden something important in the distance. You rinsed the teapot and set it upside down to dry. The act felt gentle, almost like thanking it. Then you stepped onto the covered porch. The air was cooler, sir, fresh and damp. The rain didn't hit you directly, but you could feel its presence, tiny particles carried on the loin, touching your face like a soft hand. A small clay pot sat near the steps, holding a struggling basil plant. You crouched and adjusted it, turning it slightly so the leaves could drink the light that still existed behind the clouds. In the corner of the porch, there was a bucket catching drips from the gutter. Each drop landed with a hollow plunk, making a rhythm that layered beneath the rain. You watched the garden for a long moment, then noticed something near the edge of the path, fallen camellia blossoms, pale pink and delicate, scattered by the wind. They looked too beautiful to leave, sir, slowly bruising in the rain. You fetched a small bowl and stepped carefully along the porch edge, reaching out to gather them. The petals were cool and velvety, and each one held tiny droplets like glass beads. When you brought the bowl by inside, your sister looked up. Flowers, she asked. Just for the table, you sighed. You placed them in a small vase, nothing fancy. Just a simple glass jar, and set it near the window. The soft pink against the gray afternoon felt like a secret kindness. Mother glanced at it and smiled without stopping her knitting. The needles clicked. The yarn slid. Something new was being made, slowly. Later, as the rain eased into a lighter drizzle, your father came in from the shed, shoes muddy, hair damp. Smells good in here, Hey Said, setting down a small bundle of firewood. There's tea, Mother Said, nodding toward the pot, and warm bread if there's any left. Your father washed his hands at the sink, rubbing them together under warm water, checking droplets of like the bird outside. Then he joined you at the table, leaning slightly toward the window. Ah, he sighed, watching the rain. This is the kind of day the house likes. He poured himself tea, added a small spoon of honey, and stirred slowly. The spoon made a tiny chime against the mug. Your sister offered him a piece of bread. He accepted it with a quiet nod, then ruffled her hair gently. She pretended to protest but smiled anyway. The afternoon moved in soft segments. Mother's knitting grew into the shape of a small scarf. Your sister's notebook filled with lines that looked like little trails. Your father began fixing a loose hinge on a kitchen cabinet, using a screwdriver with careful patience. Each turn made a small, satisfying sound. He didn't rush. He never rushed on rainy days. You swept the floor lightly, catching crumbs and little bits of leaf that had wandered inside. The broom's bristles whispered against the wood, and the motion felt calming, like combing a sleepy animal. When the rain paused briefly, leaving only the occasional drip from the trees, Mother stood and opened the back door. Let's check the herbs, she sighed. You all stepped outside under the wide umbrella, the kind with a wooden handle worn smooth. The ground was damp and soft under your shoes. The air smelled richer now, and leaves and something green. The herb patch behind the kitchen looked brighter after rain. Mint leaves stood tall, basil looked a little less tired, and the rosemary had tiny droplets clinging to it like pearls. Mother pinched a little rosemary between her fingers and breathed it in. We'll dry this, she sighed. Your father checked the small gutter line, clearing a leaf that had stuck there. Your sister bent to look at a snail moving slowly along the edge of a stone. He's going somewhere important, she whispered. You laughed softly, and the sound felt like it belonged to the wet iron. But inside, you laid the herbs on a cloth near the window to dry. The kitchen looked lived in, mugs on the table, a few crumbs, knitting yarn, a screwdriver on the counter, but it looked happy, like a place where warmth had a habit of returning. The rain began again, lighter than before, as if it didn't want to interrupt. As evening approached, the sky dimmed into a soft blue-gray. Mother lit a small lamp, its light warm and gentle. The glow made the kitchen feel even cozier, like a pocket of calm held against the wide, wet world. Your father put a pot on the stove, nothing complicated, just rice warming slowly, with a little broth and vegetables. The smell rose gradually, familiar and comforting, promising a simple dinner. Your sister folded her notebook close and leaned her cheek against the table, watching the lamplight reflect in the window. Can we do this again tomorrow? She asked, voice quiet. Mother reached over and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. If it rains, she sighed. And if it doesn't? Your sister asked. Mother smiled. Then we'll make our own quiet. You poured the last of the tea into the mugs. Even though it had grown cooler, it still tasted like mint and warmth and rain. Outside, the countryside continued its gentle song, drips from the roof, distant frogs beginning to call, the soft rustle of wet leaves. Inside, the kitchen held all of you in its slow, steady comfort. Hands busy with small tasks, hearts resting in the ordinary kindness of home. And the rain, patient and unhurried, kept tapping the window as if to say, stay a little longer. There is nothing else you need to do right now.